Welcome to the Power of the Truth podcast. I'm your host, Fran Willoughby, and today we will dive deep into the story of a remarkable individual whose fight for justice and equality has left an indelible mark on history. My guest, Duncan Lustig Prean, is a former naval officer who stood at the forefront of an incredible movement that led to transformative change within the Royal Navy and beyond. In a time when being true to oneself could mean the end of a career, Duncan took a brave stand against the deeply entrenched policies that discriminated against the LGBTQ+ community within the armed forces. His courage and relentless pursuit of equality not only changed laws but also saved lives and inspired many to fight for a more inclusive and fair world. Join us as we explore Duncan's incredible journey from living in the shadows to becoming a beacon of change, and learn about the impactful work he continues to do today to support others. This is a story of resilience, truth, and the power one individual has to inspire systemic change. Stay with me for an enlightening and moving conversation with Duncan Lustig Prean. Let's go. Welcome to the podcast, Duncan Lustig Prean. Thank you so much for being here.
Real pleasure.
So, for our listeners, would you please tell us a little bit about who you are and how you've ended up to be on the podcast with me today?
Well, I'm a former naval officer. I was dismissed from the Royal Navy in 1995 when I reported a blackmail attempt because of my sexuality. In those days, there was a policy very strictly enforced that one couldn't be lesbian or gay in the armed forces. It was enforced to the extent that military police conducted extensive surveillance operations and visited gay bars, installed cameras outside gay places, and tried as much as they could to catch people and find out. I was approached by a blackmailer, a scenario that actually I'd rehearsed in my mind as everybody living in the state of paranoia that was the military for gay people then. But we all exercised that. And when that blackmailer approached, I knew that there was only one decision that I could take, and that was to report him to the authorities. He was actually courted by the authorities. They told me his name before I gave it to them. He regularly visited them and outed people. So it was a rather perverse reversal of who you would have thought was the victim of the crime, which was me. I became the criminal and he became the much used and useful person to the military police.
He was an informant, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Gosh, and of course, a good friend told me about your story, and obviously this being all about the truth and the power of the truth. Of course, your story really struck a chord with me because obviously you'd had to live a lie for so many years before that incident took place.
Yes, I mean, I grew up on the Isle of Wight, which was in the 60s and early 70s when I was growing up, was quite a difficult place to live. It is still a small community where everyone knows everybody. It has very conservative ideas. Even now, many visitors will say it's like stepping back into the 1950s. So there is my natural state as a youngster and as growing up into teenage years was to be in the closet. I then went to music college. I didn't envisage a career in the Navy, although I love the sea. I went to music college and studied to be an opera singer. And I had this sort of explosion for 4 years at college where my sexuality could be expressed. And I realized there were other people just like me. But I, at the same time, fell in love with the Royal Navy and joined the Navy. One was a bit more, shall we say, in the closet in those days. And the late 70s, it was still not the sort of thing that you would advertise necessarily in any workplace. But I wasn't aware of the rules when I joined. And it was only later in my career when I discovered a letter addressed to my commanding officer with a police report about one of our sailors, who was a virgin, but had confided in a friend that he thought he might be gay. And that friend reported the conversation, and this poor kid was arrested, was interrogated for 3 days, and there was the police report about him. And it was for me a horrible moment of realization that my then boyfriend, who I would bring to the occasional mess function, although we never held hands, I would introduce him as my friend, but I felt confident enough to bring him. That could never happen again. And so from that moment on, I would say that the natural closeted position, which I'd adopted for most of my life, became a lead-lined coffin in which I had to place that aspect of my life.
Mm, gosh. And just to be clear on the timeline, so you went into the Royal Navy in what year?
1979.
1979, and it was still illegal, wasn't it, to be homosexual in the armed forces until the year 2000, is that right?
Well, yeah, the year 2000, January 2000, the law changed. And I suppose that's when my unlikely Damascus moment of coming out into the light and being very publicly a gay man. I would not have been in that position had it not been for an organization called Rank Outsiders, who'd advised me when I was going to report the matter to the police over that final weekend before all hell broke loose. I got involved with them. I was quite useful to them as a senior staff officer who had worked in the law and personnel matters. I could advise on some of the most difficult cases. I had quite a lot of clients. I happened to be in August 1994. I was not yet discharged. I was suspended and being paid, actually. I happened to be with friends in Plymouth and my phone rang and it was the local police. But by some miracle, I was there. And they said, look, we've got a young sailor. He's on the bridge, on the Tamar Bridge in Plymouth, threatening to jump. Now, this kid, a youngster, he was 18, he'd endured 3 days of interrogation, he'd endured a forced medical examination to prove that he was gay. The military police had gone to his family, who were evangelical Christians, who then threw him out of his house. So the kid had lost his job, his parents, his home, his pension, everything seemed lost. And we chatted in the pouring rain for about 3 hours in the early hours of the morning until finally I gained his confidence and came down from the fence and we hugged. And it really was from that moment that I realized that as somebody with a voice, if I was worth the commander's rank, I had to stand up for young people like that and say to those in power, this is wrong. And really, from that moment, I couldn't afford to be in the closet for other people's sake.
No, absolutely. I mean, it's just an incredible story
Mm.
and terrifying, really. And I know from the conversation we've had before that all of those police records have now been destroyed, haven't they?
For the majority of people, yes. The military police in all three services got together in 2012 to discuss what to do with all these police records for something which was no longer an offence. And they stated that they did so to protect confidentiality of people because this was highly personal information. A cynic might well say that they did it to prevent any future claims for compensation or indeed restitution, which is now being paid.
Indeed.
I am, I suppose, one of the lucky ones, having challenged this whole affair and taken this matter together with three other people to the European Court of Human Rights. My past in police report is is preserved forever, but the majority of people know they no longer have those records.
Mm, yes, interesting. So your CV reads really like three different lifetimes, I think. It's so when somebody asks you what you do for a living now, how do you explain what you do?
I would say I'm retired, which means that I'm busier than ever I was in my working life.
Yes.
I chair Brighton Fringe, which is second, third largest fringe festival in the world, second only to Edinburgh. And I chair another charity, which is a new charity looking after those who were discharged and dismissed, who still experience trauma, many of them apart from the awful interrogations, many of those invasive medical investigations have never really left them. For women, especially, not uniquely, but largely for women, there was an awful lot of well publicized now sexual trauma from the military service. But in the case of lesbians, it was very often even heightened because of their sexuality, either because people had suspected that they were lesbian and therefore they were attacked, or because, and here's a military named it, was called Rape You Straight. And there's some of my people I look after who've experienced rape or even gang rape because of their sexuality. So
Gosh,
there is a lot of trauma out there to deal with, which is unresolved. And as people claim for restitution today and are having to write those statements, all of those memories which have been shoved away for 30, 40, 50 years in some cases are now coming out to the fore. And that's really traumatic for them. And so my job is to try and help them to get those memories out to put down on paper, but then put them back to bed and deal with that unresolved trauma as best we can.
goodness. And obviously, I mean, you wouldn't have been in the position to do any of the work that you're now doing had you not lived through that time. So, as much as it's so difficult to say everything happens for a reason, obviously, the work you do now is so powerful and important.
Mm,
Obviously, that must
yeah.
be incredibly rewarding for you. I mean, rewarding, perhaps not the right word. What's the word? It's a
I think it,
privilege, I suppose.
yeah, it is a privilege to help people. It really, really is. And from the days of Rank Outsiders to this day, we are and we did save lives undoubtedly
Yeah.
when people felt that there was no hope. And when those memories of those times are reawakened, again, those feelings of not having any hope come back. So that's important. We do that.
So I saw on your LinkedIn profile that you were described as one of the most influential naval officers in the last 50 years. So when you look back on that, does that feel accurate to you, or does it feel a little bit surreal?
Well, I mean, I did a little bit of influencing in my time in the Navy. I was quite alarmed, for example, to see that although I was working in the headquarters in the second city, which has a huge population from the global majority, our headquarters with 300 people had one person of color. And that to me just seemed extraordinary. And so I investigated and did some work changing the way we advertised, the locations we advertised in, and also looked at our recruitment methods and the very questions that we were asking and the very relationships we had. And I exploited our one black face in the unit actually and said, right, come on, we need to get this right. Please, please help me get this right. And
Mm.
we managed to improve our recruitment year on year while I was there until we got to 6%, which again was still underrepresented, but we were getting there. The next thing I worked on was much later in my career when we were looking in 1989 at the approaching lack of school leavers, the demographic trough, a situation the armed forces face today. And I got a typical Ministry of Defence signal saying, investigate the demographic trough and solutions. You're not to spend any money. You mustn't dilute entry standards. You mustn't extend training times. You can't do anything really except solve this problem without any money.
Mm.
And I sort of sat back and thought, how on earth am I going to solve this? And I signaled back quite cheekily, actually, saying, well, have you actually thought about opening up recruitment to 51% of the population? Now, I expected either a wry laugh or a slap on the wrist, but the signal came back and said, that's interesting work on it. And so I did the first initial paperwork, which then led to the review for women serving in the front line. To me, it was a no-brainer. I was serving with female sailors. In fact, 70% of my sailors were female. And I noticed, having spent my entire life at sea, how the, the problem children were the 25, 30% of men. The emotional maturity, the ability to get on with the job and do it professionally, and the dedication to that job came from the women. So I was a convert right from the start.
Yes, how interesting. And so that legacy that you've left behind? Because what year was it that women were finally allowed to
So
serve on the
they
front
came in
line?
1991.
Yeah, which is, yeah, I mean, still late, but nevertheless,
Yeah,
I,
and
it,
it is late, and we have a few very senior women now, and but of course, to get to that senior position, whether you're going to be a sergeant major or an admiral, is going to take you time to work through the ranks and
yes,
to get that. So, we're still getting there, I think is the answer.
yes,
I think there's, the main thing, the last person that said to me that, the cultural change that you managed to achieve on the homosexual issue has been quite extraordinary. And I think that when we were campaigning for change, we were having a dialogue. We were having a dialogue with the military, we were having a dialogue with the public, and we had to change hearts and minds. And that was key to it. And the campaign is one thing, winning a legal action is one thing. Changing the hearts and minds of quite conservative people in the armed forces and achieving what they have achieved today is quite incredible.
yes,
Not perfect, what employer is, but my goodness, have they embraced it? And that's all down to the dialogue we had, the fact that we worked with them to write the rules for when the policy changed, because I think they knew that the law was going to change sometime. It's really important if you want to achieve a cultural change, you bring people with you rather than drag them with you.
yeah, absolutely. And you led that campaign, didn't you, that ended the
Mm.
ban on LGBTQ, well, it was LGBT then, was it?
Yep. So the LGB sort of ran with us, and then the trans community were dealt with somewhat differently by the military, and they regarded it as a medical issue. And actually, they moved much more quickly. They were,
Really?
yeah, they sort of came and regarded it as, okay, can we resolve this issue and call it medically and be more supportive? So effectively, in 1999, there were moves that were very positive for the trans community.
And was there a single moment? What was that turning point? Was it the young lad on the bridge when you just thought, I can't stay silent anymore. Like this, I have to speak out and support people. Was that the moment for you that
For
changed
me, yeah,
everything? Yeah.
absolutely. And the closet was my safe space. That's I inhabited it. I lived an effective life, a lie, I thought. But for me, to see someone so desperate, you've got to be pretty stone-hearted if you're in a position where you might be able to have a voice, to
Yeah.
deny that person your voice.
Was there a sacrifice for you in that truth, in deciding that this was going to be your path now and that you were going to fight the cause? Was there a truth cost for you?
No, none whatsoever. And I think that with hindsight, of course, at the time, you're terrified of, as every gay child is, of what's mum and dad going to think? What are my friends going to think? Am I going to be rejected? I was lucky. My parents were immediately supportive. In fact, when I told my father, he said, well, it's unfair dismissal. You must sue them.
Oh,
That was his immediate reaction, which, coming from a very conservative military schooled strict Austrian Catholic upbringing father. I thought, my goodness. Okay. So for me, no. I still have to check myself there. I find that because my natural state is the closet, I live in Brighton, and Kemp Town in Brighton is a wonderful place. It is the hub of gay life in the UK.
absolutely.
And still I am reticent about holding my husband's hand.
Really,
Yeah,
it's
it's
still,
that's so ingrained. So
yeah,
ingrained.
that hangover
Yes,
from that, yeah, the fear, I guess. It's the
absolutely.
fear.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, gosh. So during, you didn't just fight one battle. Obviously, you've changed the law three times. You've tackled
Mm.
racism in the forces. You've opened doors for women. So where did this r relentless sense of duty come from, do you think, for you? Like was it just in you, that sense of leadership and courage? Because it's, that resilience to fight the
I
fight.
the bolshiness, the The kid who didn't like unfairness appeared in my second week at primary school, aged 5. There was a girl who sat in front of the class on her own, and we had desks which were two people desks, and she sat on her own. She came from a very poor family. There were 9 siblings in a very small house, and like many older houses on the Isle of Wight, they didn't have a bathroom. They had a bath they would bring out. Sylvia smelt a bit, and I just sort of accepted that Sylvia smells a bit and didn't think much of it until our class teacher told off a naughty boy and said, right, go and sit next to Sylvia. And I saw her face and I realized that the punishment was to go and sit next to the smelly child. And I jumped up really cross and I said, Miss Young, that is outrageous. And a 5-year-old using words like that is outrageous. And it's caused pain to Sylvia.
Oh,
And I went and sat next to Sylvia myself.
oh.
And I think from that, I have never liked injustice. I have never liked unfairness. And later, when I was in business or as an employer or in the Navy, when I saw talent not being used or even approached because there was prejudice, whether it was prejudice about not reaching out to black people and making sure that they're in your selection list, seemed to me an utter waste of the talent available to you. And what employer would want to do that, surely?
So interesting, isn't it? And I must admit, I can really relate to you because I've always had the same sense of injustice and truth telling, and it has got me into trouble over the years. Because even as a child, I would speak out if I felt there was an injustice. It's interesting,
Yeah,
isn't it, how it does seem to be ingrained into people's personalities almost.
yeah, and I don't know whether I'm told that my great grandfather was actually quite the same, but on
Really?
the German side of my family, I know that the other one was pretty radical as well when it came to things. But
So possibly even hereditary.
it's possibly even hereditary. Yeah.
Amazing.
Uh,
That's
uh,
incredible. So you've led the board at board level across sectors, and
mm.
obviously you mentioned the fringe, which is incredible. So when you're working in these high level environments, what's your philosophy when crisis hits and everybody's looking at you? Like what's your first thought about how we're going to tackle this? How does that manifest?
Get your team together, because the solutions will lie with the people that you lead. And a leader, a leader is actually at their best when they are a facilitator, when they empower their teams to come up with suggestions. One of the admirals I worked for commented when he dined me out when I went to his residence, and he and his wife dined me out when I left his and moved on, said to me, you're the only staff officer who's ever had the courage to tell me what I didn't want to know, which I did notice that of the staff officers because of that awful hierarchical system. My view is you've got to tell your senior what they don't want to know. There's no point in having a board of directors unless they're prepared to say to a CEO, hang on, no, you've got this wrong. You need to think again. And so
Yeah.
it's all about getting your team to solve the problems. And life is going to throw lots of curveballs to you, whether it's in business or just in your life. And how you resolve it, well, you resolve it by getting a good team around you and making sure they're empowered.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Because in telling him the truth, the uncomfortable truths that perhaps no one else was prepared to
Mm.
say, he trusted you more,
Mm. Yeah,
didn't he?
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, when he arrived in the headquarters, he relieved an admiral who was lovely, lovely admiral. And he came with a reputation of being very, very difficult. And I was pussyfooting around as his secretary and going into the office at ungodly early hours and leaving late and really pandering to his every whim and watching as staff officers were sacked because he didn't like them. And one day he called me in and asked me for an opinion. And I pussyfooted a bit. And he said, no, 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 tell me what you really think. And I let rip and I told him what I really thought. And he looked at me and there's those steely eyes, and I thought, oh God, here it comes. And then he threw his head back and roared with laughter. So
Brilliant.
yeah, I thought, okay, I've got you. So from that moment on, I realized I could actually say to him, providing, I couldn't go in there and just sort of do something unresearched. I would need to back everything up. But providing I'd done that, I could say, like, this is going to hit us next time if we don't resolve it now. And he would listen.
Interesting.
Mhm.
Yeah. Have you ever had a moment when you actually thought, oh, hell, I might actually be out of my depth here?
Goodness, yes, of course you do. Yes, when I mean the first big time, I suppose, was when we took on the fight against the government, and you realise here you are, a tiny organisation which has no funds, which is going into a legal action, which is taking on what was then largely a hostile media, with public opinion not on your side, and you're little people, and you're taking on the might of the government. I was amused when we actually won the case, and we were all arguing about costs in court, when we realised that there was a team of 28 lawyers in the Treasury Solicitors Department allocated just for us. That's the sort of forces you were up against. So it was a
Right.
very uneven battle. Yeah, that
Absolutely.
was one of the times. And of course, any leader is going to question themselves, should be questioning themselves, because especially in a military situation, you're leading people who are prepared to take a bullet for you.
Yes.
So you need constantly to be reassessing yourself and to look at, really be cognizant of your weaknesses as well as your strengths.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know that a part of your work, and indeed for yourself, you have been helping veterans get restitution and reclaim medals. I know you
Mm.
had your rank restored, didn't you? Is that the right
Yes,
terminology?
yes,
Yes. And so that must be incredibly special work to be part of, to see people, having been dismissed so cruelly in lots of cases, to get back that piece of their identity from that period in their life.
that is so important. And
Yeah,
it is restoring the dignity that that individual feels that they have lost because of what happened to them is so important. And many are understandably really quite reluctant to engage again with the military. But they are,
understandably.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely understandable. But the military has now changed. And for many people, not for all, but for many, that being welcomed back into a restitution ceremony, into the bosom of your regiment, or into the back into the fleet, and realize that actually you are welcomed, your service is valued, is very, very cathartic. When we had the LGBT memorial unveiled by the King, which in itself, for me, is a signal of the utmost power to the world of where we now stand. And I saw the healing power for people of being accepted back into that family during that ceremony. And there were a lot of tears.
Of course, I can imagine. It's such incredible work. And you've been applauded by the Navy and the Parliament and Fire Service and theatre audiences, of course, as well. But what recognition in all the work that you've done, because you have received a lot of recognition, I know, but what has touched you the most personally? Was it that ceremony with the King?
No, I think it's people like the kid on that bridge.
Yeah.
It's more important than that, anything.
Oh, that's
Um,
incredible. So when you're not transforming entire systems and laws and things, what brings you back to yourself? What's how do you look after yourself in and amongst all of this?
for me, my escape is music, and it's generally opera, or it's being around theatre people are just wonderful. For me, the Fringe is the most wonderful nightmare I've ever had. Trying to run an arts charity in the current climate is an absolute nightmare. But
Yeah,
the people that you work with, the artists that you engage with, it's a joy. And every time someone achieves a breakout from a Fringe environment and makes it big, you're just go, yeah, we've done our job. And that goes for our team as well. So many of our team go on to greater things, whether it's a great art gallery or a bigger arts organization. So it's lovely to see people grow and get something out of us.
Absolutely. It's a, yeah, as you know, a case very close to my heart, anything to do with the theatre. But I know the funding situation is just horrendous right now. So I really sympathise with your battle on that
Yeah,
front.
we've had to change the way we work in the arts.
Yeah.
You are now, you may be a charity, you're now trying to run a business and maximize income generation without selling your soul to the devil. And sponsorship is hard. Grants are even harder. So it's trying to persuade smaller sponsorships and lots of them rather than no big savior is going to come in and say, here's £200,000 to keep me going. That doesn't happen.
No, the Arts Council have pulled a lot of funding in the last year, haven't they?
Yeah, yeah.
I know. And the extended deadlines and all sorts of things. It's been a
Mm.
nightmare, I know. So, if you could whisper one truth in the ear of every leader in the country tomorrow morning, what would it be?
Look after your people.
Mm, yeah, all of them.
Well, yeah, absolutely, every single one. And be, I think most genuine leaders love to see people turn around. The really good people, they're going to make it anyway.
Yeah.
That one is struggling, who you can help, who turns good. Oh, wow, that's a feeling.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah. And where do you still see the greatest resistance in equality? Because obviously that's your battle, isn't it, for equality? We all want that for everybody to feel
Mm.
equal. And where do you see the greatest hope? There's obviously still resistance in some areas.
Yeah, there is. I mean, I think I am really concerned with the conversation about the trans community at the moment and the dubious legal assessments of their status at the moment, which is horrible. I see a horrible dialogue going on about migration and immigrants. I am the offspring of immigrants myself.
Well, I think we all
Uh,
are, aren't we?
well, yes, what Brit isn't? But I am here because of the generosity of British people towards my parents. But when I hear words like rats and vermin describing migrants,
Yeah,
I recognize the same language in Nazi newspapers in the 1930s.
that's
It's not
terrifying.
acceptable.
No,
I'm also very concerned about Islamophobia and anti-Semitic behavior as well.
yeah, absolutely. There's still a lot of work to do, isn't there,
Yeah.
around that? And where do you see the greatest hope? Like, I mean, I think that the world is waking up, hopefully, and we are becoming a more civilized society in some respects. Would you agree?
Yes, in some respects we are, but I think that I've always had a lot of faith in the British for having a very strong sense of fairness, of actually being very tolerant. And we all go through some peaks and troughs in politics, but I think that sense will out and will reign supreme.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've changed laws and culture and history. So is there another mountain that you're quietly climbing in the background? Is there
I
anything
think,
you're working on that you can tell us about?
well, I've been working for years on my autobiography, and my husband keeps telling me off for not doing it. No, what will happen at my end of time with the Fringe, because you shouldn't stay as chair for too long in an arts organisation. It's not your train sit, it belongs to our audiences and our artists. So thank you for letting me play with it, but what it'll be passed on. That's
Yes.
my successor. No, I will find another cause. I'm quite sure that somebody will say, "Would you mind being a trustee?" That'll be my next thing.
Yes, I'm sure. Oh, well, I look forward to
Mm.
reading your book. I'm sure well, gosh, I mean, there's just so much to fit in. It'll be a tome.
Yeah, I need a good editor, but it's not going to be all heavy. It's going to be full of laughs as well. The first few chapters that make you chuckle as well as make you think.
Well, I mean, ultimately, your story is one of hope, isn't it?
Mm,
Which is the most important thing. And because we have to remember so many who didn't make it, don't we?
yeah,
And suicide rates are still high, aren't they?
yeah, very high.
Especially in the armed forces. And I know if anybody has been affected by any of the things we've talked about, you've given me links to put in the show notes,
Yeah,
haven't you? And
yes.
and what would you say to anybody who's listening to this that is struggling? What would your advice be?
Don't try and hold on to it yourself. Go and talk to Fighting with Pride. Go and talk to our charity Outstanding. Go and talk to the Samaritans. Combat Stress. And if you're in a position where you feel it's all too much, there are people out there who will not only listen, but they will also help.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to finish with a little quick fire round. So, a truth that you once avoided but now embrace.
Sexuality,
Yes. The bravest decision you ever made.
probably taking the government to court.
Yeah, absolutely. A belief that you think the world needs to drop immediately.
A belief,
Mm.
having utter faith in the politicians, which I think they've probably dropped already.
Yes, but you're right. I mean, yes. I mean, although,
Isn't
yeah,
it horrible to get cynical in older age?
it is, but I agree with you. Your personal definition of courage
Standing up for what you believe is right in the face of all the bricks that they can throw at you.
in all adversity,
Mm.
absolutely. Duncan, thank you. What an incredible conversation. Your work is just, I don't even know how to describe everything that you've achieved, but thank you so much for telling us your story. Like I said, if anybody has been touched by anything that you said, there will be information in the show notes. And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Fran.